Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom, when you're ready to see glucose in a whole new way. And by No Foods. No grain, no gluten, no guilt.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, maybe you've resolved to become more organized with diabetes in this new year. There are so many things we all have to keep track of. Organizing can seem like a tall task. In fact, there's a name for how that makes us feel. Diabetes overwhelmus.
A term coined by the late, great Dr. Richard Rubin. And diabetes overwhelmus encompasses all that we need to do all day long without a day off, without a moment off when you have diabetes. And that includes keeping up with provider or clinician appointments and everything that has to do around your health records.
Susan Weiner is a registered dietitian and nutritionist and the co-author of The Complete Diabetes Organizer. She's also the 2015 AADE Diabetes Educator of the Year. She's got great advice about everything from supply storage to your kitchen to your doctor's appointments. Plus, a look at the origins of the Apple Watch's potential to monitor glucose and where it stands now in a new segment we're calling Now You Know. And a New Year's resolution I'm making for the show, but I need your help to see it through. Oh, and remember, I'm not a doctor, and as always, this show is not intended as medical advice. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of the show, our first of 2018. Happy New Year. Here on Diabetes Connections, we aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection, talking to celebrities and authors and athletes in our community, as well as the healthcare companies and the tech folks that are pushing things forward, and of course, the everyday people, I put that in quotes, living with diabetes. As longtime listeners know, my son was diagnosed with type 1 just before he turned 2, more than 11 years ago. My husband has type 2. I don't have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, local radio, and television. And that's how you get the podcast. Now, I am not much on resolutions, really. I know every year I kind of think about, well, I'm going to lose 40 pounds and then I'm going to, work out every day and my house is going to be super clean. And they kind of go by the wayside. But I have one that I'm going to keep this year. If you can help me out. I want to hear more from you as you listen. I'm really hoping to celebrate milestones with you. And I'll have a lot more of this at the end of the show and on social media. But the gist of it is, if you're marking a diaversary or an accomplishment or something you want everybody to know about, I'm going to work to get your voice heard. And I'm going to make it as simple as possible. And again, more on that a little later. Please make sure to join the Facebook group. That's pretty new still, but already lots of good discussion and fun stuff happening over there. It's called Diabetes Connections, the group. And just like everything we talk about here on the show, you can find links and more information in the show notes. And that includes more info about Susan Weiner, her great book, her great advice, coming up in just a second. We are proud to be sponsored by One Touch again in 2018. And, handwriting your blood glucose levels is the ultimate throwback. The One Touch VarioFlex meter seamlessly syncs with the free One Touch Reveal mobile app to create your dynamic electronic logbook. And when you choose the One Touch Reveal mobile app, you'll be joining thousands of other people living with diabetes. In fact, as of this past October, One Touch Reveal was the #1 downloaded diabetes management app in the US, Canada, France, and the UK. To upgrade today to the One Touch VarioFlex meter and One Touch Reveal mobile app, visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Touch logo. My guest today is an award-winning registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified diabetes educator. Susan Weiner is the author of 2 popular diabetes resource books, Diabetes 365 Tips for Living Well, Expert Advice to Help You Thrive Every Day, and The Complete Diabetes Organizer, your guide to a less stressful and more manageable diabetes life. Now, we are going to focus on organizing today. Susan is also a key advisor of Marjorie's Fund, as well as Diabetes Sisters and the Beaties organization. She's the AADE's 2015 Diabetes Educator of the Year, and she's a lot of fun to talk to. Here's my interview with Susan Weiner. Susan, thanks so much for joining me, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm so excited to be here, and happy and healthy New Year to you and your listeners as well.
All right. Thank you so much. It's funny. I was so excited to talk to you because after 11 years now of type 1 in my house, and my husband has type 2, we have stuff everywhere. We try to stay organized, and I have my cabinet, and then we have a bag and another bag, but there's stuff everywhere, and then it's the routine and the doctor's appointments. So I know you're going to fix me, and everything's going to be great today.
Yes, it's just that simple.
All right. But seriously, how do you start? Where do you tell people to go? And, it seems overwhelming when you have to do as much as you have to do for diabetes.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. I start off my presentations by telling participants that we don't do diabetes perfect and we don't do organizing perfect. So start with one small piece that can help your day and your diabetes day go a little bit more smoothly. Maybe that has to do with the supplies that you need when you leave the house in the morning. Maybe it has to do with preparing what you need for the next day the night before. So we can talk about a few of those little things throughout our discussion today, but just start very small. Any one little thing that you want to do, it's going to go a long way.
So you've got the book, and we'll talk a lot more about the Complete Diabetes Organizer. But when you're starting out, how do you even know what to pick? Where do you what's chapter 1 for all of us?
I like starting in the kitchen. Maybe that's my registered dietitian hat speaking. We ask people to prepare healthy meals, and they have the education in so many circumstances. They know how to carb count. They know more about portion control, what's healthy, what's not. Why aren't they doing it? Could it be that they can't see their countertops, or that everything is so jumbled up in your refrigerator or in your pantry? So start by stepping out of your kitchen for a moment and looking in and see what you want to tackle first. One small space. And maybe it's the countertops. Let's start there. If it's overly cluttered with newspapers and maybe bills that you have to pay or doodads that you put on throughout the day and people just left around, start by decluttering there. Decluttering gives you such a fantastic sense of accomplishment. You can find what you need when you declutter. The second piece in the kitchen, which is so helpful, is move things out that you're not using day to day. If you still have your Christmas china out in the kitchen and it's already January for New Year's, it's time to reassign that to a different place in your home so you can get to your usual pots and pans and wares that you need for day-to-day meal preparation to make it that much easier for you. So start with decluttering one small area of your home, and the kitchen is the hub of the home. The warmth of the home is usually the greatest place to start.
That's a great point about the kitchen, because my husband and I did that a couple of years ago. He loves the kitchen and he likes stuff. He likes the mixer and the coffee stuff that he has. And we kind of had to figure out what really needs to stay out and, and what can we move so we can see the countertop.
Absolutely true. I use the acronym SPACE. SPACE starts with S for sorting. Sort what different things in the kitchen, what you're using every day. If you have 2 coffee makers, you want to use one and get rid of one, right? So to make more space, start by sorting. P is for purge. Donate. Get rid of the stuff that's chipped or broken or that you're not using. A is for assign. Move things to where you need them to be in the kitchen or into another place in the home. C is for containerize. Put things into clear containers because clear is king. You could see through them and know what you have. And then E is just for continuing the efforts of maintaining whatever strategy you're using. So these little acronyms help us realize how to organize and really how to stay with it, how to equalize the system.
I love it. That purge one is really hard for me. I sometimes need to call my sister or my husband. What should I get rid of this? Am I really? And they're like, yes, donate it or even throw it out. Sometimes it's just so old. Why do we hang on to stuff? It's so funny.
Absolutely true. If you haven't used an appliance in about a year, that's the gold standard that I use. Get rid of it. It's the same thing with clothing that you're holding on to forever. And Stacey, so many people are in need. If you want to donate to a Goodwill store or your church or a synagogue, people can definitely use what you're not using. But tossing it and that feeling of openness that's going to help you feel more accomplished and less cluttered is going to help you stay organized, stay focused, and really stay motivated.
You know, when I thought about diabetes organization, my first thought is the cabinet with the supplies. Can we talk about that? Because I'm a cluttered person. I don't mind piles and things like that. I'm not a neat. It's kind of embarrassing to say I'm not the neatest person in the world, but I do. Whenever we get a new shipment, I try to go through the cabinet, except for the top shelf, because I don't know what's up there, and get rid of old stuff or organize. How can we tackle that diabetes cabinet or even create a space if you don't, a lot of people don't have a whole cabinet to dedicate to it?
Yes, all great points. So I ask people to think like a library. And for people who haven't been in a library in a while, a library is that place with the big hard books that you get to read, that you don't have to read on a different type of technology or device. So in a library, things are put together that are like. So cookbooks might be in one section, and children's books will be in another section, and romance novels in another section. So you can find what you're looking for easier. Diabetes supplies can be grouped together so that you can find what you're needing more easily. If you don't have an entire shelf or shelf space for it, you can get a clear plastic container or even a couple of stackable containers because you're using vertical space, not horizontal space that spreads out, but vertical space that stacks up, where you can find what you need in a jiffy. And on the top, put a little label. It could be with a piece of masking tape that you write on so you know exactly what's in there and what the expiration dates are. And Stacey, if you're finding that things are a little bit cluttered, maybe in your extra storage supplies, extra batteries, or things of that nature, go through it, slim it down, keep what you need, toss what you don't, or we used the word before, purge what you don't need. It will help streamline what you need so you can find it easier.
There's just so much stuff, especially with pumping. I've seen a lot of people use kind of an over-the-door, one of those shoe organizers that's clear, and I think that's great, but I don't know, I don't like to take everything out of the boxes. I feel like it's better to keep it in the box. Do you have a stance on that?
I think it depends on what it is. When I do diabetes organizing talks, I bring the clear plastic shoe bag with me to show people what it looks like. I do. That's one of my props because I like to show that you can put into the shoe bag either individual supplies sometimes or carb-counted snacks. And kids who are trying to help to get more involved in their diabetes management so they can feel empowered can re-put things in the clear plastic slots so that you can see it. So I think that that's really a good idea. To some supplies, and again, every tool, tip, and strategy has to work for the individual. If you like to keep things in the box, the only issue that I have with that is, do you know when the box is emptying? It's great if you're traveling to keep the box because it has might have the prescription on it, may help you get through traveling easier, shows the expiration date. But if you use the last supply from that box and the box is empty when you reach for it, then that's an issue. So when you take something out of the box or it's becoming emptier, mark on it, say 1 left, 2 left, whatever in there, so that you can see it from the outside. Remember that clear is king. So in a clear plastic container, you can see what's in it, but if the box is not clear, mark what's in it on the outside so you can see what's inside.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than opening that box of insets and there's nothing in it. And when you have teenagers, they do that with food all the time. They put back, the potato chips with nothing in the bag, or the milk has a drop left in it.
Yeah, exactly. Teenagers or significant others or spouses. That seems to happen across the board. Absolutely true. Yes.
Love it. We're kind of going through the high spots here. I know there's a lot more you could say about supplies, and we'll go back to that for sure if you'd like to. But I also was interested that one of the points you make about organization is about health records and doctor's appointments. I wasn't thinking of it that way. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important? We'll get back to Susan in just a sec, but I need to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Dexcom. We started using the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system 4 years ago when Benny had just turned 9. It was a whole new world. I mean, the Dexcom CGM system changed the way we looked at diabetes. When you can see and track glucose levels on a screen, it's incredible, especially if you've relied on finger sticks for a long time like we did. I mean, we had 9 years without a CGM. And it's incredible how much easier it is to spot trends and head off extreme highs and lows. The Dexcom G5 mobile continuous glucose monitoring system is the first FDA-approved device to let you make treatment decisions without pricking your finger. CGM-based treatment requires finger sticks for calibration, may result in hypoglycemia if calibration not performed or symptoms expectations do not match CGM readings. For more information, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. And now let's get back to Susan Weiner talking about getting organized when it comes to health forms and doctor's visits.
It's so overwhelming. Diabetes overwhelmus, which was a term coined by the late, great Dr. Richard Rubin. And diabetes overwhelmus encompasses all that we need to do all day long without a day off, without a moment off when you have diabetes. And that includes keeping up with provider or clinician appointments and everything that has to do around your health records. And even though you can have electronic health records and everything is now sent and through portals and all these things with that, your questions are not when you go to your different appointments. Your medical paperwork is not always carried through, and there are errors and mistakes. So I always ask people to write down their questions, either pen to paper or to put it on an electronic device, whatever works best for you, because that helps to take the remembering out of remembering. When you write something down, it takes the remembering out of remembering. And then all of your medical paperwork, what is one date that we all have to observe in this country? Right? It might not be a holiday that we all observe, but one date that we all observe in this country is April 15th, tax day. So I use that as a point of documents to do with your medical paperwork or bills or unpaid insurance claims or issues that you're having from a reference point before April 15th of the year and as a current point after April 15th of the year. And everything that's referenced, that can be old insurance policies, flex spending plans, maybe old lab work, whatever it is, old logs, you can keep that in reference. The previous year of reference, a lot of people like to keep in a binder because they still like to touch it. They like to look at the paper, and then after that can be scanned in. The current documents can be kept, again, scanned in, but also in a current binder so that you can bring it with you to medical appointments and actually show it or reference it while you're with the physician, while you're with your healthcare provider. So I really like that. It helps to keep you organized, but it also reduces that diabetes overwhelmus feeling that you may have when there's so much you have to do and so much you have to coordinate, and finances are truly an issue.
Yeah, man, there's so much to do. And even as you said, with electronic records, a lot of us do like the paper or even need, just a printout or two with, account numbers and passwords. I have, as the mom, and stereotypical here, but many moms run the household, or wives run the household for banking and doctor's appointments and all that stuff. And I have 4 people in this house with 4 different doctors, 3 of whom have a chronic condition, and it's like, oh my gosh, this insurance and that health company, it's crazy.
It's very overwhelming, and anything we can do to reduce that stress, which absolutely will affect your diabetes and your chronic condition and your ability to cope So everything when we get rid of some of the things that take up our precious minutes, then we have more time for want-tos. Want-tos which may have nothing to do with diabetes or any chronic health condition. So by streamlining these things and giving us peace of mind, I have everything in my hand when I go to the doctor's appointment. And sure, you have it on scan, you have it on backup, but you look also more serious when you go into that clinician appointment with everything lined up. And you are better prepared on the phone when you finally get in touch with a representative. If it's in front of you on paper, you could take notes and thumb through it. It's very important for follow-up that way.
You know, we talked about the kitchen. I want to go back to this. We talked about the kitchen counters, but I realized we never talked about, you mentioned the refrigerator and the pantries. We never talked about the food. Do you organize your food?
It's a great idea to organize your food shopping and your food the way that you need it to be organized so that it works for you, because everybody has different levels of organization. But if you keep a shopping list, whether it's pen to paper or you use an app or you do it on the notes section of your phone, you're more likely to buy the supplies you need to prepare your healthy meals, and you don't double purchase, which can break your bank and really break your budget. And when you're preparing a healthy recipe and you're looking for one of those ingredients and you can't find it, that's an issue if you don't buy what you need to have. When you come home and unpack your groceries, I talk to people about, are they unpacking for fit or for use? If you've ever taken out a can of beans or a can of tuna fish or some veggies that you're buying and you shove them in, either to the refrigerator or you fit them in to the black hole in the back of the pantry, you're never going to find it and you're going to wind up duplicate purchasing it. So it makes a lot more sense to buy a few or to set up your pantry. It makes a lot more sense to set up your pantry so you can find things. Maybe you need a lazy Susan, pardon the pun, in your refrigerator or your pantry so you can find things, or taking all your seasonings and spices and putting them on a tiered rack so you can see what you have. It makes sense to explore more vertical space, stacking things together in clear containers that are labeled so you can see what you have. So just look at tossing what might be expired, tossing things that are duplicate purchases that you don't need. Take an inventory and see what you do need. We also tend to purchase things and tend to look for things that are in our prime real estate, which is the area between our shoulders and our knees. That's what you reach for first. That's prime market space in the supermarket, where, by the way, Stacey, there are 45,000 different items in a typical supermarket, so we want to go in with a list and get what we need. But even in your pantry, keeping things that you need most often right in front of you in that space between your shoulders and your knees is so great because you could find what you need really quickly and keep the things that you want to eat less often, maybe the less healthy items that are sometimes foods, on a high shelf where you can't get to them as often. All these little practical tricks will help make things so much easier for diabetes management.
Susan, how did you get into all of this? Is this something were you organizing your pantry as a little kid?
No, it's actually something I've been a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator for 28 years. And I'm very clinically and classically trained. And I'm looking at the people that I work with who have diabetes and other chronic conditions and people who are trying to maintain and lose weight. And with all the education that I'm providing and really listening, I'm a very good listener and trying to see where they are in their journey, there was still something missing. And one night, my very dear friend, Leslie Josell, who is an organizing guru and a very famous professional organizer, called me and said, tonight I'm going to be on the TV show as the organizer, Hoarding Buried Alive. So I tuned in. It's a great show. And I tuned in and I'm watching her take this man. He happened to have been an Elvis impersonator in Brooklyn. And I'm watching this man who also had chronic health conditions, who was feeling completely overwhelmed in his existence. And by Leslie taking very small steps, very small tools, tips, and strategies that worked for him, one small step at a time, so he felt accomplished in what he was doing, a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, why can't we take these strategies and make them specific for lifestyle change for people with diabetes? Because 99% of diabetes management is self-management.
Yeah, it really is. It's unbelievable. So an episode of Hoarders is what led us to this, huh?
So I'm going to make you laugh. It's called Hoarding Buried Alive because we don't say someone is a hoarder.
Oh.
Same way that we stay away from calling somebody a diabetic rather than a person with diabetes. That's personal preference, but I was schooled on that as well.
Well, I appreciate that. Words are important.
Yes.
They really, all kidding aside, that's not, I bet there's a podcast for those people. Because everybody's got something to say.
Yes. As a matter of fact, there is a new paper that's just come out between AADE and ADA on language and diabetes. And it doesn't apply to everyone, but it does address the sensitivity that some people have for language. For example, a person may not want to be referred to as a diabetic, but a person with diabetes. Not to test your blood sugar, but to check your blood glucose. Not to use the words control and compliance, but rather influence. So language is very, very important and helpful in education.
I agree 100%, and I actually try very hard to use the words the way you just laid them out. It's really been quite an education. I like it. I don't mind if someone says, oh, your son's diabetic, but it just doesn't sound right to me. It's more like, well, he's got diabetes or he's a person with diabetes, but it's not offensive. But I think when you start talking this is a different topic altogether, but when you start talking from a healthcare perspective, there's just, the wording is so important. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's that's a whole other episode, but a really great topic.
And we will speak again about it.
Oh, I bet we will.
Yes.
There's so much good advice here, but I do know that even without, diabetes aside, this time of year, right in January, we're all a little overwhelmed, right? We've made these resolutions. Sometimes it's just the kind of thing where you're trying to bite off more than you can chew. We started by talking about starting small. Can you reiterate that just a little bit? Because there's a lot of information here. And of course, I'll link up information about getting the book because it really will help you take it step by step. But how do you not get overwhelmed?
Taking a step back and looking at what your goals are, not your healthcare provider goals, not your spouse's or significant other's goals, your goals in what you want to do. Pick one goal and be smart about it and then break it down into a step. So what doesn't work is when you speak to your provider and they say, lose weight or exercise more. That vague goal is so overwhelming. And when someone says eat healthy, I don't even know what that means. It has to be a lot more specific. So if one of your goals is, for example, to exercise more, that is an umbrella goal, break it down into a small, accomplishable step. So take out your schedule for the week and say, I can probably fit in 20 minutes of walking with my neighbor who loves to walk at 6:30 in the morning before work. If you're not a morning walker, I could fit it in at 6 o'clock in the night after work or during lunch with a coworker. And then circle it in, put it in your phone as an appointment, really as an appointment, and set yourself up for success by the night before, because morning minutes are completely precious, especially when you have diabetes. And I have a lot of organizing tips for that as well, for the mornings. Lay out your clothes the night before, your sneakers, your socks, your hat, your sunscreen, whatever you need, so that you just accomplish 1 or 2 times a week walking. And that will be something checked off your calendar that you did. And that's The gym is certainly not for everybody. The treadmill is certainly not for everybody. It could be dance. It can be walking. But schedule it in as a small appointment. And that's really where you start. And as a certified diabetes educator, I work very diligently to listen to the people I see in my office, to hear where they are on their journey when we set up these goals, so that they don't feel overwhelmed and they don't look in the rearview mirror to see what they didn't accomplish. We work on what they can do, what they can accomplish, with the limitations of time and maybe physicality. There may be certain things that they can or cannot do. But I really suggest only taking on one goal at a time.
You mentioned mornings and people with diabetes. Can you give us a couple of tips?
Of course. I love to set things to music. So whether it's a child, a teenager, or an adult, or an older adult, find 3 to 4 songs, and put them on a playlist that you wake up to in the morning. Songs that you love, not that a parent loves or a spouse loves, songs that you know that you love in the morning. When the first song comes on as your wake-up song, that's the time that you're waking up and you're checking your CGM or your blood sugar. You know you're enjoying the song. You know when the song's going to end. You know how much time that gives you. By the time the second song starts, you're moving to your second activity. Maybe that's going into the bathroom and grooming, doing whatever you need to do, whether that's taking your insulin or medications or whatever adjustments you need, and so forth. By the time it's the third song, you're getting dressed, you're moving forward. And by the way, there's no moving back. There's moving forward to room in the morning, so that you learn to stay organized and just go forward in the morning. And by the time the fourth song, because music is such a brain booster, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's the best.
It's the best. By the time the fourth song comes on, you're already dressed and ready to leave the house, where, by the way, you have what's called a launching pad when you're leaving your home. A launching pad is where you have your diabetes supply bag and anything else you need to have in the morning, aside from what's in the refrigerator that you might need to bring, that's already set up and ready to go, so you don't forget anything. And the reason is that morning minutes are really precious. Evening time, we tend to have a few minutes extra to make sure we have everything to go for the next day. I love doing this with children and teenagers, or people who feel a little bit scattered, because it takes so much stress off that you don't have to think about things in the morning because it's set for you the night before. So using music as that brain booster to help you calmly get through your morning routine with all that we have to do with diabetes in the morning, and setting up what you need to take for the day on the launching pad, are 2 great pieces of advice that anyone can do. Anyone can do.
All right, so can I ask, what are your songs, or what are some songs that you like? Or, is that okay to ask?
Absolutely. So a song that I love in the morning is, I'm a big Carole King fan. I saw Beautiful on Broadway too. I just love Carole King. So I wake up to the first song, I Feel the Earth Move. So that's the one that I really love in the morning. And then I also love jazz. I love New Orleans jazz. So I like that as the middle songs. And then as I'm leaving, I actually like some Justin Timberlake tunes. And I change those over time, because that speeds me up at the end of when I'm leaving in the morning. One other thing I love to suggest for precious morning time is to use an analog clock rather than a digital clock, because an analog clock shows the sweep of time. You see time move on an analog clock. And there's nothing wrong with putting an analog clock in every room of the house for a teenager. The bedroom, the bathroom, and the kitchen, or the workout room, whatever room that it's in, because they can see time moving rather than just looking at it digitally on a phone, which does not have the same impact.
Isn't that interesting? And that works.
It does.
Wow. Okay, so before I let you go, Susan, one of the things that comes up a lot in those of us who are, let's face it, lucky enough to have, pumps, CGMs, I mean, this technology is really racing forward, but it can cause a lot of extra stress and there's extra supplies. Any things to think about as it seems like technology is kind of racing forward, which is good, I think, but, can be a little overwhelming.
It's overwhelming at times, and it's difficult to keep up with at times because some people feel left behind if they're not using the latest technology. If what you are currently using is working for you and you feel comfortable with it, you feel in range, it works for you with your physical activity, it works with you emotionally because you feel comfortable with it, it's staying on the way that it's supposed to be, and you have plenty of supplies around it, stay with it unless there's a problem with it for the time being. That's really the greatest advice I can give. It can sometimes be more stressful if you're reading posts on social media, especially of people who might be doing something different. Of course, if there's a way that you think it can better your diabetes care and management, definitely look into it, and not to be complacent about it, but if you're really comfortable and it's working for you, don't be over-challenged by what other people are doing. This is your diabetes life, not somebody else's.
Yeah, that is such great advice because I look around sometimes and think, I should be doing that, or maybe that could help Benny, it's what was that you said earlier? Diabetes overwhelmus?
Using a phrase from the late, great Dr. Richard Rubin, he coined the term diabetes overwhelmus, referring to the anxiety and the amount of work that needs to be done every day just to keep up with your diabetes management.
Well, I hope as you listen to Susan, I hope some of this has helped you start the new year and get organized and just feel better about things, because just knowing Susan, just knowing that it's okay to feel like we have so much to do, I think is helpful in a way. I know for me, acknowledging that this isn't easy can sometimes make me feel better about being overwhelmed, if that makes sense. There's this guilt, like, shouldn't I be doing a better job?
And everything, exactly, Stacey, everything that we're talking about, diabetes educators, clinicians, physicians, endocrinologists, PCPs, pediatricians, it's so helpful to take a step back, be in a non-judgment zone, and to listen to what the person is telling you or what they're not saying. Not use yes or no questions when you're talking to the person with diabetes and or their family, but to watch what they're saying and what they're not saying. Maybe learn a little bit more about motivational interviewing techniques, open-ended questions. And that's sometimes hard to do when we're trying to share a lot of information. But by golly, that has helped me, help so many other people just by learning how to listen. I listen, this is funny, I listen by sitting on my hands because I talk with my hands. So if I'm sitting on my hands, I think it's difficult for me to speak. So that's my little technique that I use.
I totally understand that. Susan, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And of course, we'll link up all the information to your book and to your website because there's really just so much good stuff there. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information on Susan and all of her books, including the one about getting organized, at diabetes-connections.com or in the show notes. And a quick note about the notes. If you're listening on a podcast app, it should be very easy to find them. Some of them get a little fussy. You may have to click on a read more, that sort of thing. Easiest app, in my opinion, is the Diabetes Connections app. Yes, we have our very own app, and just recently added a function to it where now you can sort the shows by category. So if you click on the category tab, it will let you choose technology episodes, artist and athlete episodes, advocacy, that sort of thing. And with almost 140 episodes now, I'm finding that to be very useful. If you listen on social media, and we get a lot of people who listen right through Facebook, please click over to the homepage if you'd like to learn more and get the links. And that, of course, is diabetes-connections.com. Okay, so recently, the New York Times ran an article about the Apple Watch and its possible impact on health. And they also mentioned an interesting origin for the glucose reading potential of that watch because Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, had diabetes. More on that in a second. It's our new Now You Know segment brought to you by No Foods. And yeah, a lot of us are trying to clean up our eating in the new year, sure, but in the long run as well. And if that's you, I'd urge you to try No Foods. They make products that are bread and bready, but without grain or gluten. Waffles that are lower glycemic index. Yep, Benny likes those. I'm a fan of the muffins, and we made awesome meatballs recently with the breadcrumbs, which I guess they aren't really breadcrumbs, but they taste like it. No grains, no gluten, no guilt. Give No Foods a try. Go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the No Foods logo, and use the promo code Stacey10 at checkout to save. And that's STACEY, the number 10. Recently, there was an article going around Facebook. I saw it quite a bit, shared on social media, and the headline was, "Freed from the iPhone, the Apple Watch finds a medical purpose." This was in the New York Times. And you may have already known that Steve Jobs, the Apple co-founder, was managing diabetes even as he was fighting cancer. Now, he died at a very young age at 56 from complications of pancreatic cancer. He actually had a very rare form of the cancer, apparently, which grows more slowly. He did live with it for 8 years, but, very private about it. And as I looked at, and you may have known this, but I didn't realize at the time that he also had diabetes. Now, of course, with pancreatic cancer, it involves the pancreas. There's a lot going on there that was probably caused by the cancer, but I can't really speculate on that, and there's not that much information out there. But this New York Times article says, and I'm reading here, because he hated pricking his finger to draw blood, Mr. Jobs authorized an Apple research team to develop a non-invasive glucose reader with technology that could potentially be incorporated into a wristwatch. And that information comes, the Times says, from people who do not want to be identified because they were not authorized to speak on that. It caught my attention because doesn't it really show that when something hits you personally, that's really the time when, if you're in a position, you make the change. You really find out more about it because how can he know? How would Steve Jobs know he hated, checking his blood sugar by pricking his finger if he didn't develop diabetes? So there's a lot more to this article. It's not really about Jobs. It's mostly about what is going to happen with the Apple Watch. And they point out a lot here about the incredible amount of information that these medical accessories can collect and give to not only the user, the person with diabetes or with heart issues, other technology is quoted in this article is talked about, but also for the doctor. Because listen to this, they talk about the potential of too much information. Right? When does information just become noise? Not only to the person using it, but they had this Cardia Mobile app, which is all about EKGs and heart, and it sent the doctor an email every single time they took a reading. And the flood of emails was absolutely overwhelming. How did they look at it? When do they contact the patient back? Where do they store it? So the quote here that really got me is, quote, "A wearable device does not equal a wearable physician. As a medical community, we have to be intelligent about how to use these new technologies." It's fascinating stuff. It really is. As anyone who has switched to a CGM can tell you, when you go from checking blood sugar even 8 times a day, we checked Benny when he was a toddler 8 to 10 times a day, easy, and still would do that when he was having weird days or was ill. When you go from even that amount of blood sugar checking to every 5 minutes being able to get a reading and seeing an entire 24-hour or longer picture, it can be absolutely overwhelming, and you almost have to learn to use it in a way that doesn't make you bananas. But Kevin Sayer, the CEO of Dexcom, is quoted in this article, and he talks about the potential of the data, combining sleep or activity data with it. Bottom line here, we are still probably years away for a non-invasive Apple Watch type of blood glucose monitoring. But It's already happening when you think about the mobile apps that are available for Dexcom and other CGM makers. So we'll keep watching this, of course. But I thought that was pretty interesting information about the origins of much of the health monitoring, potentially, on the Apple Watch. And hey, now you know. At the top of the show, I mentioned wanting to hear more from you. So here's how that's gonna go. If you have a diaversary, an accomplishment, maybe your kiddo gave themselves a shot independently for the first time. Maybe as an adult, you did something, accomplished something that you weren't sure you'd be able to do, or maybe you just had a really good day. Let us know. And I want to hear from you. I want to hear your voice. I'm going to use something called Speakpipe. It's really easy. More information, I'm going to put a post up on social media, but basically, you don't need a fancy microphone. You can do it on your laptop is really the easiest, and there'll be a link in the show notes. Your phone is fine too. You may need to download an app, depending on what kind of phone you have. So I always recommend laptop is easier for that. But very easy. You just speak into your computer for a couple of minutes or 30 seconds, and I'll clean it up. I'll edit pauses out and things like that. I want to get more voices on this show. I want to tell more stories. And I want to give shout out to, accomplishments in our community. There's so much we got to slog through day to day. Let's celebrate those good moments. Some fun stuff coming up in appearances. I'm going to be in Charlotte on February 11th. We have an annual event I started a couple of years ago. It's a big family bowling event, but we also talk about diabetes camps and get all the reps from the different camps to come out and meet with parents and kids. Can you believe we're thinking about camp? But most of them open up in February for registration if they're sleepaway camps. Holy cannoli. So that is in February. In March, I will be JDRF Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay chapter, talking about tweens and diabetes and social media and all sorts of fun stuff. Then later on in April, we have our JDRF walks around here in the Charlotte area. And I'll also be traveling to Orlando for a conference called Touched by Type 1. If you'd like me to come speak at your event, I can handle several topics and we have a lot of fun. Just drop me a line, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. Love to come and talk to your group and meet you, because it's hard sometimes sitting in here behind my microphone all by myself. I'd love to come out and meet more people and hear what you have to say. As always, thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Appreciate you so much. And thank you for listening. It is such an honor and a privilege to spend an hour every week with people who get it. Oh, love it. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week. Happy New Year.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.